I'm Lorna Dueck. Welcome to a brand new season of Context.
It was an act of pure evil.
Yet another blow to the American psyche as the City of Lights turned dark over the weekend when a gunman in Las Vegas shot and killed more than 50 people and wounded over 200 more.
Will the Prime Minister finally listen to local business people and cancel these tax hikes?
Mr. Speaker, we have a tax system that encourages wealthy people to incorporate to pay a lower level of tax.
Our focus today, some Canadians expressing outrage at the Liberals' new tax proposals. What's making farmers, business owners, doctors, accountants, and workers so opposed to the changes? What is fairness in our tax system? We'll hear from both sides of that debate. Welcome to a brand new season of Context. As we enter into our 7th season, we're glad you could join us. First up, a look at this week's Context news headlines. A weekend of terror in the U.S., Canada, and France as vicious attacks claim dozens of innocent lives. Starting in Las Vegas, where the worst mass shooting in U.S. history took place over the weekend. That's the sound of a gunman raining down bullets on a crowd of country music fans. At least 3 Canadians are among the 50-plus killed. More than 500 others were rushed to hospital. The gunman, a 64-year-old Stephen Paddock, was on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel when he fired a hailstone of bullets into the outdoor crowd. Police believe he later took his own life. Police found 10 rifles in his hotel room. There were more than 22,000 people at the concert celebrating. Thousands hid for safety, others ran for cover. Here's President Donald Trump on the tragedy.
He brutally murdered more than 50 people and wounded hundreds more. It was an act of pure evil. Our unity cannot be shattered by evil. Our bonds cannot be broken by violence. And though we feel such great anger at the senseless murder of our fellow citizens, it is our love that defines us today and always will, forever.
So far, we know that 4 Canadians have lost their lives. Here's a few of their stories. On the far left, you see Jordan McLoone from Maple Ridge, BC. He was a mechanic about to start trade school in the Okanagan. Jessica Klimchuk in the middle was a mother of 4 from Valley View, Alberta. Her Facebook profile says she was engaged to be married. And Kala Madig of Jasper, Alberta. Her friends describe her online as a kind, beautiful soul. At least 6 other Canadians are injured right now. One of them is a young man from Victoria, BC. Sheldon Mack sustained 2 gunshot wounds, a ruptured colon, and a broken arm during the attack. He sent out this tweet: "So much evil in this world, thanking God for watching over me." And thousands of others thanked God last night with citywide prayer vigils taking place across Las Vegas. Where is God in this tragedy? We're sending our reporter Molly Thomas to Las Vegas to sort through those tough questions. Stay with Context in the coming weeks for that special report. Many people watching right now may be wondering, could this happen here at home? Well, in Edmonton, criminal charges have been laid in connection with a dangerous series of attacks that the police are calling terrorism. Here's security camera footage of the incident. This car busts through the security barrier and heads straight for police officer Mike Cherniak. This happened near Commonwealth Stadium where the Edmonton Eskimos were playing. After running the police officer down, the suspect gets out of his vehicle and proceeds to stab the injured officer. The officer fights off his attacker while keeping his gun at bay. 30-year-old Abduli Hassan Sharif has been arrested. He is the sole suspect and a Somali refugee to Canada. The suspect faces a series of charges, including participation in a terrorist attack and 5 counts of attempted murder. He was known to police and was even put on the terrorist watch list in 2015.
A lot of people express extreme views, whether they're, Islamic extreme views, neo-Nazi extreme views. The RCMP would have to employ thousands upon thousands of people to monitor these people. And this is the dilemma that faces a democracy. If someone espouses extreme views, when do we act as a democratic society and arrest that person?
Police continue that investigation. Constable Mike Cherniak is an 11-year member of the force. He has been released from hospital and is expected to make a full recovery. After blasting the mayor of San Juan and accusing people in Puerto Rico of wanting everything done for them, U.S. President Donald Trump is set to visit Puerto Rico Tuesday. The devastation in Puerto Rico has been called apocalyptic. Millions are struggling to find food and water weeks after the hurricane hit. Power is out in many parts of the country and gas lines are hours long. Food banks are running low. A fuel shortage is now threatening hospitals that are in dire need of fuel to keep their generators going. And people are getting desperate.
¿Cómo yo me siento? Además de abrumada.
This woman says she doesn't know how she will move past the devastation that has hit her family, but with the Lord's help, she will persevere.
Hemos descubierto que existen dos Puerto Rico.
This man says he's discovered there are two Puerto Ricos, one that looks promising, another that when faced with crisis reveals its true poverty. The U.S. government has been criticized for its slow response. Risk consultants say the country faces upward of $70 billion in damage. Whether it's religion news, justice, culture, politics, or ethics, there are stories and issues that always leave us asking why. And so, on this, our first show of Season 7, we're going to be sharing more faith-based news stories with you from around our world. In the coming weeks, Molly Thomas will visit Costa Rica and Las Vegas. Sheldon Neal will be in Montreal, and our partners at Global News Alliance are stationed all over the globe. Context has two foreign correspondents, Sheridan Sanders and Marni Blum. They'll speak to us from Rome and the Middle East. I'm joined now by a familiar face to Context viewers, Sheridan Sanders, who was with us in Canada and is now based in Rome. You work there for Catholic TV. Sheridan, tell us now, as our correspondent in Rome, what viewers can expect to hear from you during Season 7.
Well, I'm really excited because, as you know, in the Eternal City, there's a lot of really interesting people that pass through. And in particular, with all of these emergent technologies that we're, facing, big questions are emerging about, what it does mean to be a human being. So I'm going to track down people who can speak to us from bioethics perspective and from logistics or from even a philosophical perspective on what does it mean that all of these new emergent technologies that are going to change the world in a fundamentally transformative way, what that means for us as human beings. So, for example, what would be the effects of automation when mass amounts of people might become unemployed?
Okay, so
or, for example,
it sounds like the Deep Thinking Bureau there in Rome, correct?
Yes.
All right. On another note, the Pope also weighs in on issues for the world, like he's just finished weighing in on the Las Vegas tragedy. How does that get decided, what the Pope will address? Because you'll be helping us with that as well.
Yes. So the Pope usually does these weekly audiences here in Rome, and during that time, he'll take an opportunity to remember those who are suffering around the world, either because of war or some other type of violence. And because the world is the church is present in so many different parts of the world, there's people who are asking for prayers from all four corners, and that's how really the Pope will remember these people. He will either see it on the news or be informed by people, close aides, that people need his prayers, and he will always make a point of remaining spiritually close to those who are suffering, those who are brokenhearted.
All right, thank you, Sheridan. Sheridan Sanders in Rome, a new regular feature you will be seeing in Context Season 7. Well, now from Rome to Jerusalem, where Marni Blum of the Axe News Networks joins us. She'll be regularly updating us on what we can expect from the Middle East in Season 7. Marni, give us a sense of the stories you'll be covering for us.
Well, front and center, Lorna, is the shifting geopolitical power base in the Middle East. And this could have a profound effect on the security and the stability of the region. We're also going to look at counterterrorism as well as the B'nai Anusim. What do you mean, B'nai Anusim? What I mean by that is people that have Jewish ancestry. There may be 100 million of them in the world today that don't even realize that they actually have Jewish roots. We're going to be looking at that. We're also going to be looking at Israeli innovation and ingenuity, as well as the latest archaeological discoveries that are being unearthed in Israel today.
Okay, Marni, there's a big story this week in that geopolitical region, and that is the Kurds voting for an independent state. What do you expect we will see in the weeks ahead on that?
Well, we're going to be watching this very closely because this is going to affect the stability and the security of the region. We know that there are definitely players in the region, the Shiite Muslim nations who are opposing an independent Kurdistan, and as well as the allies of the Kurdish people, such as the US, the UK, the United Nations Security Council, as well as Russia and Canada that also opposes it. But the Kurdish people have a deep resolve. They've been promised a Kurdish state since World War I. So we're going to see them push back. We're going to see them determined for the state, but we're going to have to watch closely because, as I said, there are definitely opponents to this taking place.
All right, Marni Blum, our new correspondent in Jerusalem. We look forward to hearing more from you in the weeks to come. Thank you. Just ahead, a panel of tax experts and an economist from the Canadian Labour Congress will sort out what the Liberals' new tax changes mean for Canadians.
Coming soon on Context, Sheldon Neal visits Montreal and speaks with Haitian Canadians and asylum seekers building a new life in Canada.
Will the Prime Minister finally listen to local business people and cancel these tax hikes?
Mr. Speaker, we have a tax system that encourages wealthy people to incorporate, to pay a lower level of tax.
The 75 days of crossing the country are up, and the Liberal government must now make a move on how to tax Canadian business owners. But it won't be easy. After months of pushback from the opposition, the business community, and even some in the Liberal caucus, there doesn't seem to be consensus. Let's take a look at what the commotion is all about. Taxes. No one likes to pay them, but who should shoulder the heaviest burden?
I want to be clear. People who make $50,000 a year should not pay higher taxes than people who make $250,000 a year.
Here's the government's three-pronged plan. Stop income sharing, meaning business owners don't pass off extra work to family members to lower their tax rate. Limit a corporation's ability to convert income into capital gains and dividends. Finally, restrict the ability of private corporations to recover taxes through passive investments. This, it hopes, will close the tax loopholes. Thousands of small business owners are also speaking out. The Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses says 86% of its members do not support the change. The Canadian Medical Association is also crying foul. It points to the number of private practices that will suffer because tax planning measures help young doctors mitigate personal risk and pay off a decade of medical school debt. Even the Premier of Newfoundland, also the Liberal Party leader of his province, has concerns.
We need to make sure that our small businesses in Newfoundland and Labrador are fully factored in, the impact that it would have on our economy right now.
The issue is dominating the fall sitting of Parliament.
Will the Prime Minister finally listen to local business people and cancel these tax hikes?
Mr. Speaker, we have a tax system that encourages wealthy people to incorporate, to pay a lower level of tax than the middle class.
Picking it up in studio, two experts with their views on the proposed tax changes. Bruce Etherington owns a business and has sponsored Context for years. He is a wealth planning business owner. And Tim Cessna is a tax columnist and a chartered accountant at the Globe and Mail. Tim, Bruce, thank you both for being with us. Bruce, only 8% of Canadians file income tax for over $100,000 a year. The Prime Minister says they're not paying enough tax. Why do you disagree?
Well, first of all, we're here today, ironically, on behalf of the middle class. Probably most middle-class Canadians, those earning $100,000 or less, are not aware of the fact that since the current government came to power, 81% of them are paying $840 a year more in income tax on average than prior to the current government's assumption of power. So 1%, which is the target that our Prime Minister and Finance Minister have suggested that they are aiming this bullseye at.
The top 1%.
Top 1%. Is it really the top 1%? And are we talking about, as the PM says, closing tax loopholes?
For people earning over $200,000 a year.
Or over 100,000.
Okay.
The people who are not in the middle class, quote unquote, according to StatsCan. So is it 1%? Well, I believe personally, as a taxpayer and a Canadian citizen, that the impact of income tax on the 1% is quite substantial. If we look at the 1%, if this is really just about the 1%, then the 1% of Canadians earn 10% of the total income earned in the country, and they pay 21% of the total federal income tax. I'd say that's a pretty good ratio. Number two, if we then look at the top 7% of income earners, those earning between $100,000 and $250,000 a year, that top 7% earns 21% of the total income earned in Canada, and they pay 52% of the total federal income tax. So when the Prime Minister says that the top 1%, take it to the top 7%, aren't paying enough, I'd say, dear PM, where did you study your mathematics? Because if I'm earning 10% and I'm paying 21%, or I'm earning 20% and I'm paying 52%, I'd say that's more than my proverbial pound of flesh.
Okay, the pound of flesh, let's bring in Tim Cessna here. Tim, those higher earners have used income splitting. The Prime Minister's team calls it income sprinkling, the idea to make a private corporation to spread your wealth among your family as a farmer or a small business owner. And the PM and his team is saying this has to stop. Why do you think differently?
Well, Lorna, I think it's important to understand, first of all, that these proposals, I'll get to your question in 1 second, but these proposals really do impact the small business owner. Yes, you're going to impact some of the 1% that Bruce was talking about, but really these changes, and I've written articles about this in the Globe and Mail, really do impact the small business owner, and 2/3 of which are making less than $73,000 a year. All right, I'm going to park that aside for a second. Back to your question. Income sprinkling and income splitting is one and the same thing. It's the idea of shifting income from the hands of one family member who will pay tax at one rate to the hands of another who will pay tax at a lower rate. Now, if you take a look at employees, for example, take your teacher or a government employee, somebody who has a pension plan. Under our tax law, those folks are actually allowed to split their pension income directly with their spouses. You can move up to half of your pension income to your spouse's tax return. It's completely sanctioned under our law. It's completely allowed under our law, and it's welcomed. And now you take a look at business owners who don't have pension plans. They can't split income the same way. So how do they split income? They split income by paying dividends, typically to family members. So it's really accomplishing something similar, but they're not using pension dollars because they don't have pension plans. So the government is now saying we want to change that fact. We want to reduce the ability of business owners to pay dividends to family members. How is that fair when employees and pension plan members are allowed to do income splitting? So, these things are not raised by the government. They're not talked about by the government. But I think the small business owner is getting the short end of the stick here.
Okay, we want to talk about the small business owner for a minute here.
Right, let's talk about the small business owner and the middle class.
Okay.
Because, again, the government packaging and positioning of this is to convince most Canadians that this is only going to affect 1%. So most Canadians say,
top 1%.
Top 1%. Most Canadians naturally think, well, fine, my tax ox isn't being gored, so I don't need to pay attention to this. Well, let's look at small business and private business in Canada. Private business in Canada provides and accounts for 30% of the GNP.
Wow.
Private business in Canada employs 11.5 million Canadians. Now, I'm coining this personally as the family tax. Now, the reason this is a family tax is because if 11.5 million Canadians who work for private business, of which 8.2 million Canadians work for small business that employs less than 100 people. My team, I have 7 employees, okay? So this morning I talked with a business owner who said if these tax proposals become law, he is not only going to have to reduce his charitable contributions, but he is also going to have to not hire summer students, and he's probably going to have to let 2 staff members go. Why is that? It's because the tax impact on his business, which is a business that employs less than 100 people, is going to cause him to have to do that. Okay. So this tax is not hitting the 1% of top income earners. This tax is going to affect potentially 11.5 million Canadians whose paychecks are going to either be frozen or reduced or terminated, and that's going to affect their families.
Okay, Bruce, very convincing. Some voices in labor disagree with you. We're getting pushback here. I want to go to a clip that we recorded earlier with Angela McEwen at the Canadian Labour Congress.
Great.
So we already have a smaller or a lower small business tax rate. And some argue that that is meant to incentivize small businesses who, are the kind of the backbone of our communities and create jobs in the first place. And so that's true, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we want to create these weird incentives where certain types of families or certain types of family structures end up better off. And so that's what the income sprinkling happens, is if you are one partner works full-time and makes more money and another partner stays home and looks after the kids, this income sprinkling will benefit that family more than, say, a family where one partner is doing a small business and the other partner is working full-time.
Okay, Tim Cessna, tax expert, is she correct?
No, she's not correct. I apologize. That's just completely wrong. The reality is, if you take a look at income splitting in Canada, the vast majority of opportunities to split income in Canada are available to all Canadians. Anybody can take advantage of income splitting. Business owners have one different way where they're capable of doing that, and that is they can pay dividends to family members, whereas an employee can't do that. But on the flip side, employees and pensioners, like I said earlier, can split pension income. So, let's stop talking about really the advantages that business owners have over employees. It's just not right. And by the way, Lorna, I have a real difficulty with this whole discussion where the government is trying to pit the business owner against their own employees in this whole discussion, painting business owners as somehow bad people who have been cheating on their taxes. That's absolutely ridiculous. And by the way, the average Canadian, how else would they be impacted by these changes? They will be impacted. These proposals, I would propose, have been largely set to affect professional corporations. So doctors, accountants, lawyers, individuals like that. And I want to come back to doctors for a second. They will be probably most impacted by this, even more than, or just as much as any small business owner.
Okay, we need to bring this to a close, but I want to, before, I can see that you guys really are worked up about this and you know this issue. But we have to turn the corner here because context always asks, there's got to be a spiritual perspective on this news issue. There's got to be a heart of God for the well-being of our people on this. So taxes is sharing, is it not? What is your perspective, Bruce?
I can't speak for God. I'm not a theologian nor the Archbishop of Canterbury. But I can say to you that as a Christian and from my scripture readings, Jesus would say, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and render unto God what is God's. Already in this province of Ontario, we are rendering unto Caesar 55% of our income. We're shortchanging God by at least 5%. That's number one. Number two, in Proverbs 11:1, Scripture again tells us that God hates dishonest scales. Any proposal that's brought forward in the dead of summer and not given 5 years to discuss, as the Carter Commission was in the late 60s, but 75 days, any proposal wherein which the Minister of Finance stands on a platform and looks at his shoes and refuses to answer questions from 500 Oakvillians this past Friday, legitimate questions raised by owners of small business, to me smacks of being presented on the basis of dishonest scales.
Okay, Bruce, I'm going to leave you right there, but Tim, I would like your opinion. Is there a God perspective on the tax controversy in Canada?
Laurie, the answer is yes. We have to give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. That is, we are commanded to do that. No one is suggesting we shouldn't be. However, I guess we have to ask the question, who is Caesar? CSER is obviously the Canada Revenue Agency if you're in Canada. It's the IRS if you're living in the US. It's the Inland Revenue if you're in the UK. But the question is, people in capital are very, very mobile today. People can choose which CSER they're going to pay. Will they move to the US? Will they move up to other parts of the world? And what we're hearing from a lot of people is, and we've seen this before when there was a brain drain problem back in the 1990s when so many people chose to leave Canada because tax rates were very, very high at that time, and they did subsequently come down. But we're back at those levels again, and we're going to see people choosing to pay CSER in the United States and not in Canada. That's one of my big concerns over this.
All right.
Excellent.
Tim, thank you so much. Tim Cessna, Bruce Etherington. I think you guys can have a show all your own on this one. We'll be back after this. Coming up later in the show, Snapshot. We ask a theology expert to challenge the tax experts on the Liberal government's changes proposed.
Coming soon on Context, Sheldon Neal visits Montreal and speaks with Haitian Canadians and asylum seekers building a new life in Canada.
All right, time now for this week's Snapshot. Joining me is theologian Dr. Chris Renko to weigh in on our discussions on the tax debate. Chris is from St. Thomas More College in Saskatoon. Professor Chris, okay, we've got an ownership dilemma over these taxes and who gets what. What's your perspective on ownership?
I just think it's from a theological perspective, a Christian theological perspective, it's sometimes good to remember that we don't ultimately own everything that we have. And so if you're looking at ultimate ownership questions, I think there's an argument to be made that tax money is ultimately owned by God.
All right, but what if you don't agree how tax money is getting spent? And you just blindly surrender it over? You see the huge fight that's going on over these Liberal legislation proposals on our taxes. You just roll over and say, fine, go for it.
Yeah, so I think the government certainly have a duty to support the common good. And here you can also look at theological concepts as kind of like a check if you want to look at it from a Christian perspective. So there's a concept that's called tzedakah, which often is translated, it's a biblical concept, often translated as justice. Can also be translated as charity, but it's charity in that fullest sense. That term is associated in the biblical witness with God's justice. So it's two issues that are sometimes collapsed. But if the tax money is going to support something that supports the common good, then there's an argument to say that that's actually the best use of the ultimate ownership, because this concept of tzedakah also supports this idea of a community of equals, that it's a Christian duty to try to establish on earth.
And what about those who say, but it's not a Christian duty to tax us so unfairly? You heard how people are feeling, if I'm paying over 56% of tax, my income in taxes, it's just not fair.
Well, I think under the sort of present conditions we have in our society, tax is one of the best solutions we have, where we can redistribute money to sort of create that community of equals. And I think that there is also then a duty to talk about where that money is going. But if I tend to see in this debate that a lot of the concern seems to be that it's going towards things like social programs. That type of programming is working towards the community of equals. But there's a whole other set of issues that maybe we could talk about in terms of where our tax dollars is going. But to criticize people, programs that help people, social programs, I think that's sort of a misdirection in this debate.
Thank you for joining us. That was Dr. Chris Renko from St. Thomas More College, challenging us to think about taxes as a community of equals. Wow, that's food for thought for all of us here at Context. Thanks for watching, and find lots more on that view and others at our website.